We speak about the Shluch HaKan. Torah says, Ki kori kan tzipor lefonecho. If you come upon the nest of a bird, baderach or b'choleitz, wherever it may be, al oretz efrochim o beitzim, the chicks or the eggs, and the mother is nesting on its chicks or its eggs, you're not permitted to take the mother bird with the chicks, but rather you should first send off the mother bird and take the eggs. It's a positive commandment. And the Torah tells us, Man yitav loch v'arachtu yomim. It'll be good for you when you have long days. And the Gemara tells us in Kedushin, arichas yomim doesn't mean in the physical life. It means you'll have an extensive length of days in the world to come. Now, Shluch HaKan is referred to as an easy mitzvah. It's effortless, basically, and there's no cost factor. Kibur Avim, honoring a parent, is very difficult. It's one of the most difficult mitzvahs to fulfill properly, and there's a cost factor, whatever it may be. Provide for a parent. And the Torah says the exact level of reward. Sending away the mother bird and taking the chicks or the eggs and honoring the parent. So there's a midrash. The midrash tells us Harei sheish meos u'shlosh esrei mitzvos. There's 613 mitzvos. We have 248 positive and we have 365 negative. Kol mitzvah niska matan schoro, and every mitzvah mentions the reward that one deserves when you fulfill the mitzvah. For instance, go kibur aveim, honoring a parent, shiluch hakan, sending off the mother from the nest, shekosve arichas yomim, tells us there's long days. Yesh mitzvah shematan schor bonim. There's a mitzvah, very interesting. The man schar, the reward is one merits to have children. What mitzvah is that? Kingun Sora, Sori Imenu, She'erches ha'orchim. She hosted the guests, the three wayfarers, and what do we find there? The Torah says she had a child. She was barren. Shunamis, the Isha Shunamis, al Shekibas Elisha. She was that special woman. She hosted Elisha Hanovi. She was childless, and Elisha prayed for her, and she merited to have a child. Yeshavera tuna skilo sreifa herg v'chenek. And for negative commandments, we see the extreme level of punishment, death penalty. Ve'in l'chol mitzvah kalim kol mitzvos yos b'shluch hakan. There's no easier mitzvah than sending off the mother bird. Umas schora l'man yitav loch v'arachtu yomim. What is the reward? Long days, longevity. So the Medrash is Moshe l'madav adome. What is it analogous to? L'melech shehichnis poalim l'sodei l'ntoa. The king brings workers into his field to plant saplings and trees. V'lo gilem schar n'tiosan, and he didn't reveal what he would pay them for each one of the trees or the saplings they plant. L'erev, in the evening after a day's work, kol misha noto ilon echod. Each person who planted, even as much as one tree, nosa lo zov echod, he received a gold coin. His chilu hakol tmei v'omrim, the other workers, they were taken aback and they said, umaze shlo not el ilon echod kalu pochos. The one who planted only that one tree, which was simple and easy, and seemingly didn't have that much value, not lo zov echod, he received a golden coin. Onusha natanu harbe. So we planted multiple trees, and our effort was greater. Allah kamo. There's no question we deserve minimally that, if not more reward. Umaschar shluch hakan schoro arichas yomim. What is the reward for sending off the mother bird? Length of days. Schar mitzvah sheish ben chesron v'torach. So other mitzvahs, which there's a financial cost and there's an effort, and choyes the foshos, giving life, providing life for others, Allah's kam v'kamo, no question. Now, before we go further, the Midrash says that every mitzvah in Torah, the Torah mentions its reward. I mean, the only two mitzvahs which Torah mentions reward is shluch hakan, sending off the mother bird, and honoring a parent. The other mitzvahs, the Torah doesn't say. Oh, and it alludes, hachnos orchim, one merits to have children. I mean, so how does the Midrash say? If it only mentions it or alludes regarding one mitzvah, hachnos orchim, how could the Midrash say that all mitzvahs, the Torah states its reward when it states the mitzvah? It doesn't. So just a simple understanding of the Midrash. Evidently see clearly that if a person, based on a logical basis, you're able to draw from one to another, which we call a kal v'chomer, that itself is the equivalent of stating explicitly in the Torah. As he said, the mitzvah kala, the easy mitzvah, there's no cost factor, there's no effort. And you merit longevity and a good life. So something which takes a greater effort, there's no question, that's the kal v'chomer. That is called matan schorm b'tzido. It's as if the Torah says explicitly, as when it says the mitzvah, the Torah tells you the value of the mitzvah, meaning the worthiness. You're worthy. You're not doing something which is futile. And it gives the allegory of the king having his workers plant trees. Now the question is, why isn't the Torah more explicit or specific when it comes to mitzvahs? Torah should say, you do the mitzvah, you receive this. So the Midrash says, Ulefichoch lo pirush HaKadosh Baruch Hu schar osei mitzvahs. Therefore, the Torah does not reveal the reward for one who does mitzvahs. She Yisrael osnosam me'atzman. Because Hashem wants people should be motivated to do the mitzvah for the sake of the mitzvah. Lahar bo socher. If it would say that the reward and the value of the mitzvah, when the mitzvah is stated, what would be the impetus? What would be the draw to do the mitzvah? What's obvious? The reward, the Torah states its value. So the Torah conceals its value. Why? Because Hashem wants us to do the mitzvah for the sake of the mitzvah, to increase our reward. We should be even more worthy. That although it's not obvious what the reward is, and you do it despite that, therefore you're more deserving. Because then you're doing it for what reason? You're doing it because of God commanded you to do the mitzvah, or you have trust that you will be rewarded. But it's not that obvious. God did not make a commitment. Shkach Shaninu, as we learned in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, Al tiu kavodim b'shamshes haravam nas kabel pras. You should not serve the master for the sake of reward. When you serve the master, it should not be for the sake of reward. But it's very interesting. The reason why the Torah conceals the obviousness of the value is because the Torah doesn't want, Hashem wants to increase our reward. We should do the mitzvah for the sake of the mitzvah. Okay? That's the way you read it, and it's correct. But it's even more than that. That the Torah tells us conceals the reward. It's telling us when you serve God, don't do it for the sake of reward. It's two things. First, Hashem wants us to do it for the sake of the mitzvah. As it says, lahar b'socher, to increase our worthiness, our deservingness. But in addition, that the Torah doesn't associate the reward with the mitzvah. What's the Torah subtly communicating to us? When you serve God, it should not be for the sake of reward. It's two things. Lahar b'socher, but simultaneously, if a person says, you should work for me and I'm not going to pay you. You say, why should I work for you? You want me to work? You should pay me my value. So if the Torah, let's say every mitzvah, the Torah would say it's reward alongside the mitzvah. What would we say? It's okay to serve the master for the sake of reward. But that the Torah does not say the reward associated with the mitzvah. Besides, because it makes it more difficult to do the mitzvah. So the impetus and the draw should not be the reward. It's communicating, it's stating a fact, the principle. When you serve God, the master, it should not be for the sake of reward. And therefore, of course, we know there is going to be a reward. Because doing the will of Hashem, that's the ultimate level. That's the Fumtzar Agra. The more difficult it is to perform a mitzvah, that only increases your reward. And that's K'dei Lahar B'Schar. L'kach Siv. Therefore, Mishlei, Shlomo says, Mikol Mishma and the Tzor Libecha. Every situation that presents itself, you should be careful that your mindset should be a proper mindset. Meaning, you should do it for the right reason, not for the wrong reason. You know, when it says, Asi Torosel Keva, Malach Rai, why does God provide the means? Only to facilitate the objective. That's Asi Torosel Keva, Malach Rai. Work, material is secondary. It's only a means to an end. It's not an end unto itself. It's the same thing. What is the value of doing a mitzvah? It's to do the will of God. If that is the focus and the emphasis, but how do we know that? And how do we know it's not for the sake of reward? Because if it would be the sake of reward, God would juxtapose the reward alongside the mitzvah, but he doesn't. To tell that's not its purpose. The emphasis is you do it for the sake of God. Will you be rewarded? Of course you can be rewarded. But since it's not explicit, it's not contingent on that, therefore that increases our worthiness, because then it makes it more difficult, and that is the principle of Lufum Tsar Agra. The more difficult something is, the more greater the challenge, the greater is the accomplishment.